Welcome to our YouTube channel on Success and Women. Women helping women.
Come join us.
See you soon. Welcome to this week's episode of Success and Women. I'm Linda.
I'm Andrea.
And today we're going to be going on that vein that we started last week on the 50 questions to ask yourself to bring out the best of you. So last week we asked you about, are you happy, or what makes you happy? And we hope that you've spent some time reflecting on that to figure it out. But before we get into this week's, which we're going to be talking about passions and interests, along with being happy, because sometimes maybe that's where you're missing the link. Andrea's going to share you a tip this week that hopefully a lot of ladies can use regarding jewelry.
Yeah, it's funny you said that about the link for a bracelet. What makes me happy is when I can put a bracelet on without getting totally frustrated. So I've found this trick where you just take a piece of tape and you scotch tape the one end to it, to your wrist. Then you, with your free hand, you take it, you clip it on, and then you remove the tape. Easy peasy.
Wow,
done.
That's good. That's a great tip. Good link.
Good link.
Just to let you know, ladies, Andrea and I are working from home. Obviously, I'm still in Florida where it's nice and warm, and she's back in Canada where it's gotten back to being cool. Because when I left, it was hotter than Florida because we were getting a drench when I arrived, and the airports got closed and everything else. It was horrendous rain, but we're now, I'll say, overcast, very minimal amounts of rain, thank goodness, and life can get back to normal again. Anyway, so to go on those questions that we want you to start asking yourself, and ladies, from week to week, you might want to write these questions down so you have in your journal, you can start thinking about it and reflecting on the things that make you happy. But Andrea and I were talking about, you know, doing things that you're passionate about, what interests you. Sometimes you can use those interests and passions for money making, and sometimes you can't. So in this example, Andrea was very passionate about, you know, being a stay-at-home mom. Even though she was working and earning an income, she discussed with her husband what would be best for the family, whether or not they should have a family. And Andrea, you can tell them about your passions and what made you happy and still makes you happy today.
Yes, well, I think I've mentioned this before that, you know, I was working and I had one child and I was going to work every day, which I was not happy about because I had to get up early, get myself ready. You know, you work in an office, you got to look nice, and get my child ready, drop the child off at a care facility, and then go to work, and then the same thing at nighttime. And my daughter was not happy. I was not happy. And we were talking about having more children. And I just said, it's not going to make me any happier. That's for sure. So I said, if you want me to work, I'm fine with one child. But if you want a family, I need to stay home. That will make me happy. And he wasn't jumping over the moon about that idea in the beginning, but after we came to the decision, that's what we did, and it did make him very happy in the long run because, you know, you're home, you're able to watch the children, he could take care of his business. So it's whatever works for you and makes you happy. Some women would go crazy staying at home with kids, so then they have to make other arrangements. But my passion was the arts, the music, the dance, and I was able to do that with my children. And it brought so much joy and happiness in our lives, and taught my girls, you know, the art of dance, the art of music, discipline. My oldest is a dance teacher now. She makes a living from it. So that really made me happy that I was able to do that.
I have a question though. Before you had your first child and you were married and you were working full time, Did you get a lot of joy from your job? Because I know that you had met one of your very good friends because of the job that you
Mm,
still have today.
mhm.
And did it just because your priorities changed by having kids because you knew that that was what you wanted? Or if, say, for example, in my case, I wasn't able to have children, and so I've embraced working. I love working, and it's something that brings me a lot of happiness and joy to be able to work. But if you were in which a lot of ladies would find themselves in conflict, what would really make them happy? What if it's a lady that really enjoys her job, but wanted to have a family? And sometimes that's a hard balancing act. But if you hated your job from the beginning, then of course it was an easy decision because you knew you wanted to have a family. But what if you really loved your job? Like, I don't know, I don't remember in your situation, Andrea, what was it like in the beginning working?
Well, I mean, when I got a job, I was only 19 years old, and that's the job I stayed in till I got married. So it was a job I took in an office in a steel business, and I worked my way up to steel buyer, which I enjoyed. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy going. I enjoyed the people I worked with. We had a phenomenal group of women that we did monthly outings with. And like you say, I became very close to a couple of them, and one who worked for a competitive company. Her and I to this day are very best of friends. And I didn't mind, but it was not my dream job by any means. I would have loved to have been, say, a teacher or whatever, but my path didn't take me there. And I don't know why. It just didn't. And maybe if I had done that, things would have been different. But the women that I know that do love their jobs and have families have found a way to make it work. So they've had live-in nannies, a lot of them, and they found really good ones. I had a neighbor for many, many years. They found a nanny from Germany, and they had three beautiful children. They were both optometrists, the husband and the wife. They both loved their job, and it really worked. The kids loved their nanny. The nanny loved them. So it worked. So there's ways to do it if you really want to stay in your job. For me, to stay in the job that I was in, like, I think you have to have a relatively high paying job to stay working with a family and
But
hire.
that might mean stress as well.
No, I'm saying hiring a nanny. You know what I mean? Like,
No,
to
I
take
mean the
stress off.
job. If you had a higher paying job, a lot of times with high paying jobs comes a high level of stress. And
Right.
whether or not you had a nanny, it it still might mean you have very limited, and I'm going to say maybe not the best of you coming out around your family
Well, there you go. So
because you would
that's where,
take it home.
there's where you ask yourself, am I
Yeah.
happy? Is this what I really want to do? No, So like, I felt I couldn't give 100% at my work, and
Yeah.
I couldn't give 100% at home. So why was I doing this? It wasn't right. It wasn't fair to myself,
Either one.
my children, my boss, so they expected me to go, to meetings like after work, like different conventions and stuff. Well, that's hard on the family, and I didn't want to do it. So that it made my decision very easy. Of course, my husband, it was just all about the paycheck. But you know
I
what?
was going to say, because for a lot of people, Andrea, it's why they force themselves to be working at something that makes them unhappy because they don't want to lose the money. But there are ways to, I'll say, adjust your lifestyle.
Especially
To,
now, people can
yes,
work from home. But Linda,
yes.
I gave up a car. I no longer had to buy these nice clothes, nylons and dresses and
And
skirts.
I remember, actually, I have to say this because Andrea and I grew apart for a lot of years while she was raising the family, and my life took a different direction before we reconnected. So I just want you to understand this because, I was at Andrea's wedding, and I remember when she was going out with Eddie, her husband, and the nice clothes that she had. She was like literally buying beautiful well, I know that they used to go dancing, they used to do a lot of, social events. And
Right.
so this was a big thing. And so it's good that you bring that up, Andrea, because people have to know that you had to make sacrifices yourself. But again, it didn't make you unhappy. It made you
No,
happier knowing that
yes,
you were doing this for the family
yeah, and for myself,
and for yourself. But that's the
right,
whole point, because
right.
it's what you wanted out
It's
of
what
life.
happy, and that's
Yes.
exactly what made me happy. I was happy to give up all those nylons and skirts and stuff and the car in order to stay home with my children. And, eventually, and then Eddie was able to really focus on his job. And, we ended up getting another car eventually. But it, I don't know, it just made me happy. It didn't make me happy having a job, a car and getting dressed up, going
Yep.
to a job and leaving my child in the care of others. It just didn't make sense to me, I guess, because my mother stayed home as we were growing up. So
But
that's
don't
what I
forget, it
saw.
was different back then. Most of the women did stay home. My mom actually
But
worked, so
your mother worked, and so did Eddie's mom. She
yeah,
worked the whole time.
yeah.
So
But
they're,
that was the exception more than the
yeah,
rule.
yeah. So it's what you, I guess, how your thought pattern goes. I kept thinking that, it was nice coming home. My mom was there. There
Yeah.
was, food there or somebody to greet you. Like sometimes Eddie said he'd sit on the step just if he forgot his key or something, waiting.
You know what's interesting? You mentioned that, Andrea, because so my mom worked only when my dad, because he was a minor, he took shifts so my mother could work. So he would be at home when my mother worked. My mother was at home when my dad worked. So it worked in our family that way. But what
Right.
was interesting when you just mentioned with your husband, sometimes when he didn't have his key, one of my very good friends, his mother worked, and there were two children. Actually, his brother ended up passing away, but in the
Oh,
end, he was on his own, and his mother wouldn't give him a key.
oh,
And so he wasn't even what they call the latchkey kid. He had to sit on the front step, and his mother was in real estate. And if she worked late, if there was something that happened and the dad didn't come home on time, he literally had to sit out there and wait for,
wow.
yeah. And so I don't know if that made her happier, but I can tell you it did not make him happier as a child to grow up that way, not
No,
really having either parent, I'll say, waiting for you at home.
no,
And, because as a kid, you come back a lot of times excited to say, what's happened throughout the day, what
right.
happened at school, and, all these other things. And it's kind of like, well, you can tell the nanny, but it's not quite the same
No.
when you're
And I,
telling the parent, because you'd get excited when your
yeah,
kids came home and said
yeah,
something that went on, or even, and I want to say this because it has to do with an episode we'll do in the future, but strengths and weaknesses and stuff. But I just wanted, because we had talked about this, started the show today, but even with your child coming home with a mark in school that wasn't up to her par,
mm,
she felt that she was worthy of a higher mark, and she didn't get it. And you were there to comfort her, to explain to her that what she needed to do
right.
in order to find out how to improve.
Exactly. And those are things, those are opportunities missed if you're not home when your kids get home, because a lot of times there's a 2-3 hour window.
Yeah.
And by then they've gone on to different things.
Yeah.
And you say, how was school today? Oh, fine. Because
Yeah.
now they're busy. They don't want to talk about it.
And
You
they've
know,
forgotten most of what's happened throughout the day.
yes,
Yeah.
that's true too, unless it's something very traumatic.
Yeah.
But I know even with my grandson, he'll come over on the weekend. How's school this week? Oh, fine. He doesn't want to talk about school. He wants to play. I have to push him. Like, did you learn anything? Oh yeah. Okay, what did you learn? So you have to push them more. Whereas when they first walk in the door, there was always stories,
Yes.
lots of stories. And I understand it's it can't happen for everybody, but now also they have different programs that kids can go in after school. They have after school programs and different activities like Angela joined a couple at her school. She had joined a couple of a bowling league and
Oh,
horse riding team, and they
nice.
pick them up after school, take them there, and then bring them back to the school. So that gave, say, another parent opportunity, to they'd be gone for a couple hours so that they wouldn't have to worry about them coming home early or picking them up. There's ways to do it, and also tutoring. That if they have the after school programs, hire somebody. Sure, they can sit in a classroom, but maybe ask one of the teachers, like, are there any private teachers in here that I can maybe even hire once or twice a week if the child is struggling in something, or just you want them to have some extra help.
Do you remember though, when we were in school, we had late bus night. So we had a couple days a week that we could stay after school late for different activities or extra tutoring. And I remember that because I was struggling in math and I had to get extra help from the math teacher. And it was really good for me because this teacher was so attentive to help me grasp, I'll say, simple concepts that I wasn't getting in class, because you're in a class of 30 ever,
Yeah.
you can't get the individual help. And we had late bus night, and if our parents had worked, they had that extra time on those days that they knew. But I listened to Dr. Laura, which I've mentioned on several episodes, and Dr. Laura has been on the radio forever. And the thing is, what she did was she was able to work when her child was in school, but even when she had the child at home before he went to school, she worked around nap times and stuff like that. So she made it work. And now what you mentioned earlier, if there's a way to work and balance your, I'll say, home and work life through working from remotely from home sometimes when the kids
Right.
are in school, so that you're there when you're needed, kind of thing. But again, only if that makes you happy, because maybe all of these things, you're not really looking at what you're passionate about, what interests you, because you have to find something and you can't get it from somewhere else. And even if Andrea's kids, they didn't, but even if Andrea's kids came home and they were in bad moods or whatever, she was happy to be a stay-at-home mom because she knew that she could help develop her children. Not all I'm going to say ladies have that same desire. They would like the family, but they find that they have more passion for something that interests them outside the home. But when they come home, because their time is more limited, they're more hands-on and attentive because they're happy at what they're doing. Because
Right.
if you put somebody in the environment of, because they have a family and now they stay home and they're miserable, what would be the point of that,
No,
really?
no, there is no point. No.
No. And
Because
so part of the success to bring out the best of you is finding what interests you. What are you passionate about? And
right,
maybe it was something you did when you were quite young and you gave it up because you did get married, you got a career, but it's not a career that ended up giving you the satisfaction you thought it would.
right,
Because that happens. And I know sometimes people will go through post-secondary school education, they've spent all this money or their parents' money getting educated, and then they find out, oh my goodness, it's not exactly what I thought it would be. I don't
right,
want to do it. And they don't want to disappoint other people. But in
right.
the end, you disappoint yourself. And then that's part of the life that you're losing out on, because when you bring out the best, you just bring that out in others as well.
Exactly. You can't,
And you live a better, a happier, successful life.
yes, you can't teach somebody something if you're not passionate about it, if you don't believe it, if you're not happy about it.
Do you know one of the ladies that I know, she took, a 4-year degree program that her parents paid for. They really believed in higher education. Of course, her mom was a teacher, so teachers really want to educate their kids. And after she got out of university, well, both her and her brother went on, I'll say, into the business world because it really was something he was good at. He was excited about it. He excelled at. He was very passionate about it. She didn't want anything to do with any of that. And in the end, what she found made her happiest was actually waitressing and bartending. Because she had flexible hours, she worked, I'll say, the times that she felt like working. And she worked actually at a couple of jobs because she loved meeting people.
Right.
It made her happy to go to work. It didn't feel like work because she actually got, now the only time that I guess she might have got stressed was when we hit COVID and the service industry shut down for a bit. And I know that she did lose one of her jobs, and a lot of businesses didn't come back the same way. And she may have had to look, but it is a service industry, and they were always looking for good people. And she's got such a sunny disposition because she's happiest when she's around people.
Well, you know what? It's funny because when I was a teenager, I also was a waitress, and I loved it. I loved being a waitress. I don't know why. Maybe it's like you say, being around people. Now, I was 17, 18, so I couldn't work in a bar or anything, but I worked at one of our high-end restaurants, the one, and I loved it. I got to meet, dentists and doctors and the professional hockey teams that came to Sudbury, and I met quite a few people, and I enjoyed it, but it wasn't.
It's funny because it's the same with me, Andrea. I've always enjoyed waitressing. When I did it all the way through school, even part-time. I had 3 part-time jobs waitressing. In the summer, I waitressed, and I actually did get to work in a bar as well. And a bar was kind of a cool thing because people didn't have to go out to drink. Okay, this is a luxury for people to get to do that, although it's a lot cheaper luxury back when we were growing up compared to the way it is now. But the point was, people were usually in a happy mood when they went. And, so it was always a fun environment, and it never felt like work. And then you came home with all this tip, and I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. Because when you do something that doesn't feel like work and you're getting paid, it's like a double bonus, really.
Well, what is that phrase, that saying?
Well, when you love what you do, you never work again. So I always said, when I left the government, and I worked for the federal government in up until 1990, and I said that's when I retired, because I didn't enjoy that job working for, not just because it was the government, but that's a horrendous place to work. For me personally, because I didn't like the waste. When I work, I really work hard, and there's a lot of people that are slackers, just wanting to have their pension. I mean, there are a lot of good workers, okay? They're not all there. They're not all slackers. But in the government environment, it's not the same as a business owner, where they look for efficiencies. In the government, they don't care about efficiencies.
No.
And so if you're a person that is very conscious about your tax dollars and where they're going, like I was, it bothered me. So when I left the government in 1990 and started on a new career path, I always said I never worked again, but I put in more hours. I did a lot more work, because at that point I was working for myself, but I loved it. It did not ever feel like work.
Right.
And so people ask, about retirement. I said, I retired in 1990. Now I just do the things I love to do. And I'm very passionate about the things that I do.
Well, and that's the main thing. Like, I mean, I can say the same about my husband. I mean, he was a chartered accountant. That's what he went to school for, university for. He worked for a very high-end company in Toronto, but he wasn't happy driving to work in the traffic, suit and tie. And I used to say to him, change what you're doing. Oh, what can I? And then, his buddy came along and said, I'm thinking about building some houses. What do you think? And we talked about it, and I said, go for it. You can always get another job as an
That's
accountant.
true.
Just try it. He did, and that's the end of that story. He's
Yep.
still building homes to this day, but he loved it. He
Yep.
loved it. And I don't know why. I guess it
Well,
brought out,
Andrea, he loves it because he still does it.
yes,
Because I know you've talked to him about retiring, and he's enjoying what he's doing. For him, it's not a job.
that's right. And it
And
gets out of the house, out of my hair.
well, now you're saying that, but I remember when you were trying to get him to retire, to slow down. But the thing is, what's great about it, he not only enjoys it, but he loves being around people, and also he loves helping people.
Right.
So that's a really big thing, because he gets a lot of that satisfaction because there's so many more people to help. Yes, he helps the family. He's always doing things for the family, but
Right.
it wouldn't be enough to keep him totally happy
Right.
because he's got so much to give.
Yeah. And you get
And-
satisfaction of a job well done.
Yes, exactly. And it's funny because I used to talk about that before, like when you work, you get a lot of accolades of
Mhm.
people telling you what you've done is good, or like when you were working and you got steel at, if you got it at a competitive price, or you got the order that they wanted because some people were struggling to get
Right.
enough steel and all that, but you get this accolade that you don't get at home.
That's right.
Nobody cares whether or not you take the garbage out or you did the dishes.
Little boost to your ego.
It does. It
Yeah,
absolutely
it does.
does. And so you have to, I'll say, almost live without that, knowing that you're giving that up when you decide that you want to be a stay-at-home mom and wife, where it's somebody that needs that stuff and they feed off that and they're
Yeah.
passionate about that. It's harder.
Yes. And you know what? Then it's funny you say that, because I've often thought about that. And that's something that I never needed. I never needed that. Okay, it's nice when somebody says,
Yeah.
oh, that's really nice or whatever, but I don't need it because I want it for myself.
Yeah.
Like when the dishes are done, I say, oh, look what I did. That's great. I got the kitchen cleaned up and now I can go relax. That's what I look for, rewards for myself that I give myself when a job's well done. And I've never said to them, oh, nobody ever says thank you. I don't know. I don't say that. It's because I guess I don't need it. I know when I've done good and I'm happy. I'm happy.
Yeah.
That,
But it's interesting because there's a lot of actors, and I won't say athletes so much, except that they'll stay sort of tied to sports, but not in the same way as when you're younger. But entertainers, they can be extremely on the other side of where they should be retired. But the reason they don't is because they still like the accolades they get when they've done a job, that entertain people, whether it's a comedian, a musician, an actor, when they know that people have enjoyed whatever it is their performance was,
right.
they feel good, and that keeps them motivated to keep going. And if you remember George Burns, and I'm not sure if he made it to 100, but he had plans right up until age 100. And I think on New Year's, he was supposed to be at some, facility, because it gave him so much pleasure.
Well, it's like
other people happy.
Right now, Clint Eastwood, he's 92 years old and he's still looking for roles, and I think he just did a movie last year. He has no plans to slow down. Dick Van Dyke, there's all kinds of people that, and I think that's another good thing. You must keep your passions and your interests always in the forefront, because that gives you a reason to get up, a reason to get dressed, and a reason to live.
Yes. Because it's easy to give up if you've got nothing left, if you're not passionate about anything.
That's right.
That's true. So before we bore you all ladies to death on beating this dead horse, we're going to let you go for this week, but tune in next week to hear again another question that you could be pondering to make yourself the best you can. it's always about yourself, because when you love yourself, you can easily express that to other people.
Yeah.
But it all starts here. So I'm Linda,
I'm Andrea.
and we hope that you
Like
share.
and please subscribe.
We can't do it without you. Until next week.
Amen. Bye, ladies.
Bye.